Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 103 being recorded on August 5, 2023. With me in the chat at twitch.tv/socialism S4A are about 2 dozen viewers. We're doing this on a Saturday early afternoon, and those are a bit different from the midweek ones. Sometimes we stream like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, somewhere in there. And a lot of times on the midweek streams, we'll get 50 people in here, and the questions are sort of just I could go for 4 hours probably just talking to the chat. The Saturday streams are a bit different in tone. It's an opportunity to get some longer readings done. There are, of course, chat questions as well, but I can kind of get in and get out a little bit easier. So last week we did 3 streams, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. This week I posted those streams. Those are all up now. Then we're doing this today. I'm going to post this probably Monday or Tuesday. And then the next thing up after that is going to be Luxembourg's Reform Revolution. And then we're going to go into a string of Luxembourg things from there. So that's what's coming up this month. Keeping it brief on the what's coming up this month front, because I feel like in reviewing the other streams I talked about that for too long of a time. But before we get into anything else, let's thank the patrons. This is still from July. Patreon's a little bit weird about updating itself. It takes like a week for all of who's current and who isn't current to sort of update itself. So this is still the July graphic, but I'd like to thank also Darlene Pagano at the $2 level, Nova at the $10 level, Gabriel Reed at the $5 level, and Forrest Staub at the $10 level. Patreon.com/Socialism for All. We don't run ads or anything on this channel, sponsorships. Try to keep it non-commercial and viewer supported. We greatly appreciate that support because it allows me to spend a lot more time on this channel than I'd be able to do otherwise. Got some solid support going. Really appreciate it. Names in green have been supporting for over 2 years. Names in yellow have been supporting for over 1 year. White names are less than a year. And I've been saying this for a while, but it's actually true now. We're going to have our first blue name, first over 3 years name. Of course, we started the channel in February 2020. Started actually as a Facebook page before that. We've seen a lot of growth. Actually, we're at 16.2 thousand subscribers on the YouTube now. And, I'm in contact with a lot more people through DMs on this system or that system, whether it's Patreon or Reddit or wherever. It's great, and then of course there's the YouTube comments as well. It's great to get feedback from people, and people suggest readings and different ideas, and that all improves the quality level of the channel. I like to think I have pretty good ideas, but it's that much richer with thoughtful, intelligent feedback and contributions from many different people, and that's really appreciated. So there's a lot that goes into keeping this thing afloat. But if you like the channel, thank me, but thank a patron, thank the contributors as well. Like I said, it's really not just me that makes this thing what it is. But so I mentioned we're up to 16.2 thousand subscribers on the YouTube, which is great. Also, Spotify is a newer thing. I just set that up a few months ago. And go follow on Spotify. I think we're somewhere around 1,000 subscribers or followers, whatever they call it on the Spotify podcasters thing. It's podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/socialism for all. I will see what I can do eventually about shortening that, but it is on the screen there if you want, or I'm sure if you just search on Spotify Socialism for All, it'll come up too. Also on SoundCloud. Basically everything that I want to move over is moved over on the SoundCloud. We still have on the Spotify several hundred of the older audiobooks to move over that I haven't had time to do yet. But yeah, so YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify. You can find us on the platform of your choice. And Spotify is actually nice. SoundCloud, of course, is audio only. Spotify, you can do audio or video. So where there are uploads where there's some kind of visuals involved, like the audiobooks, not so much, but like the streams, for example, I can actually upload videos, and it's sort of a nice backup of the YouTube. So we got 2 things going on there. And yeah, no, it's just exciting to see all this growth. Um, Speaking of where we're online and DMing and things like that, I wanted to mention, as I mentioned the last few times, really haven't been using Twitter at all the last few weeks. Don't even slightly miss it. Feel like my stress level is lower. I may have said before, using Twitter, it's like being in a sustained car crash, just gets your adrenaline up. It's like, again, getting into like a traffic accident every 5 minutes for just the duration of using the thing. Um, Plus, now that Musk has rebranded it X, that's, I mean, another nail in the coffin of just killing the site, which he's insisting is going to become a $1 trillion brand and handle banking and everything, as somebody put it. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be handing the death threats website my banking information. But also now you can only view Twitter if you're logged in. So that's making it much less socially relevant. And, they used to cite Twitter in all kinds of news stories, and they could embed tweets in news articles, and now you got to be logged in. And so, yeah, you can't both build something and make it less socially relevant. Elon Musk is just, as Forrest Gump said, stupid is as stupid does, and boy, does he do it. And yeah, so anyway, there's no point to posting over there for me at this point. I'm not deleting the account. I'll leave it up for those who can see it. But if you're shouting now into a closed box, albeit one with a lot of people in that box for the time being, I don't want to do that because I don't want to. I don't want to be writing just for people who are logged in and that kind of thing. So that's too bad. But anyway, there's Blue Sky setting up to about 520 some followers on there now. So it's looking like a lot of the more. See, the thing about Twitter is there may be hundreds of millions of users or whatever, but only a small fraction of those post. Many people just lurk and read, and then an even smaller fraction of people post really actively, like every day, multiple times a day, that kind of thing. And a lot of those people are moving over to Blue Sky. So, yeah, he's going to make another. I mean, he's going to turn Twitter into another Truth Social, basically. Just this kind of like Musk fanboy, right wing kind of thing. And again, it's not worth the effort. So there goes that. Anyway, it served its purpose. I had a lot of interesting conversations there. And the one thing I'll miss for now is there's a lot of COVID researchers on that site. And, there's a very good long COVID community there. People actually share research about the ongoing pandemic. Speaking of, let's do a quick check-in. So for the last 6 weeks, there has been a growing resurgence of COVID in the U.S. You can see there. Even the lull that we had been in from about March up until early July or whatever, late June, that lull was about 200 copies of virus per milliliter of sewage. This is wastewater monitoring. You can't go by the cases because they don't count cases anymore. When everybody was getting PCR tests that got reported to the government reporting systems, then you could rely on the cases, but they stopped doing that over a year ago. That's the teal part underneath the dark blue line. The dark blue line is the level of virus that is monitored in the wastewater, and that more greenish aquamarine, whatever color, underneath it is the cases. And as you can see, it used to match closely, and then last year they stopped counting them, and so the cases have been way underneath the actual COVID levels. That's no longer an accurate indicator, but the wastewater, much more accurate. It's also very speedy. It's a leading indicator instead of a lagging indicator. In other words, it shows up pretty much immediately when somebody gets the virus, and then they discharge it in their waste. It goes into the wastewater and is detected really soon thereafter versus, cases lag, and then hospitalizations lag, and then deaths lag by, several weeks and so on. But there's a more accurate measure, and even the lull that we were in was higher than the 2020 lull or the 2021 lull, and definitely higher as well than the early 2022 lull before it went into, as you can see, that big double-peaked spread that we had last year that was basically like a sustained, what would have been a sustained, winter spike, like for the 2020-2021 winter. You can see there on the left, January 21 We were at that level the entire year last year. So lots of people, COVID doesn't just kill. And a lot of the people who survived the initial waves of COVID, remember, many people didn't. Many people are dead now. Over 1 million people in the US alone are dead now from COVID. But the ones who survived, for one reason or another, they have some resistance to maybe they're less likely to die from COVID, although the number of reinfections that you get, with every additional reinfection, your risks of negative health outcomes goes up, whether it's heart attack, whether it's brain damage, whether it's hospitalization, death, your risk goes up. So there's some cumulative effects. Your fourth reinfection is not the same as your first reinfection, in other words. COVID is a lot of serious inflammatory and other damage to the body. Anywhere that you have ACE2 receptors, and that's actually not the only receptor that COVID can attach to, but even just the ACE2 receptors, you got your brainstem, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your gut. It can also bind to different receptors on T cells in your immune system. That's one of your body's main immune defenses for fighting both other infections, so it can impair your body's ability to fight other infections, as well as cancer. Your T cells also play a role in, your body monitors on an ongoing basis for cancerous problematic cell growth that is not the way that your body needs to normally undergo cell division, and the T cells can step in and kill those cancerous cells before they get out of control. If you're dealing with depleted T cells, we could say that this is probably a carcinogenic virus, in that it can contribute to the growth of cancers. Again, this is a novel virus, and it's only been going for a few years. People are just studying it now, so we don't really know its full effects. So anyway, the point being, we had all that spread last year, and I just got into an argument with a blue MAGA person on Blue Sky who's trying to tell me, well, people aren't dying anymore. First of all, yes, they are. But this disease doesn't just kill you, it also can disable you and cause major organ damage. So even if you live, you may be dealing with severe shortness of breath for 6 months or 9 months or a year. You could be dealing with emotional disorders. It can cause depression, anxiety, other problems. It can cause, quote, brain fog or cognitive impairment, also executive functioning impairment. That's basically the name for the set of skills involved in goal planning and basically ordering your life and being able to set tasks and complete them and things like that in order. That's executive function. And COVID impairs it, or at least it does in many people. It has a high potential. It's one of the most common symptoms. I had very bad brain fog all through 2021. I feel like it finally, after about 11 months, lifted, but I still don't feel entirely the same. So yeah, it doesn't just kill you, it also disables you. And, who knows what the ultimate lifespan shortening effects are from repeated infections. Let's not find out the hard way. But anyway, we had this lull, which even as COVID lulls go, was pretty strong, and now it's coming back. So let's zoom in on this a little bit more and go into the 6-month view. So there you can see it more closely, and we're back up almost to 400 copies per milliliter of sewage. By the time you get up to like 800 to 1,000, that's a really serious, they would call that a surge or a spike. So we're halfway basically to a full-on surge. If you've taken your mask off, put it back on now, because it's going around again. Let's break it down by region. Actually, first, let's just look at the 6-week. So there you can see it's been steadily rising for the last 6 weeks, and just continues to go up and up. But breaking it down by regions, here's the 6-month view of the different regions. You can see that the Southeast is flattening off a little bit for right now. That can be a reporting error. Sometimes more data come in and it'll adjust the most recent part of the curve. But basically the Northeast still climbing, the West climbing even more sharply, and then the Midwest. So basically from the Dakotas down and over to like Ohio, that's climbing sharply at like a 60-degree angle or so. So we got a major thing going on here, and it's being led by a relatively new variant, the EG5 variant. So right now, this year's Omicron, in the sense that Omicron last year, not this past winter, but the one before, was the breakout strain. And then for the following year, all of the different child strains of Omicron, BA2, BA4, BA3 wasn't as much of a thing, but BA5 in particular, those strains, 2, 4, and 5, drove most of the spread throughout the rest of the year, and then particularly BA5 offshoots like BQ, there was BQ1 and BQ11, that drove sort of the fall, and then XBB took over. The X means that it is a crossbreed strain, basically, so X is like, cross. So basically, that means that somebody got infected with more than one strain at the same time, and the two different strains of Omicron swapped genetic material in their body. So it created a recombinant strain of virus that has properties or genetic material from both the strains. So that XBB, that was driving a lot of the December through like February wave, and now there are a whole bunch of different XBB offshoots. Two of the bigger ones are XBB 116 and XBB 19. So this one right now is an offshoot of XBB 1.9.2, but then it's like a mutated version of 192. And that's EG5, it's the new dominant strain, and that could be the reason. I mean, the other strains are contributing to the growth as well, but that could be sort of what makes a new wave break at this point. So COVID is not over, it is coming back, and we had no reason really to expect it to do anything other than to, lay slightly low for a while and then come back. Why? Because the idea that people just get some sort of persistent, really effective long-term immunity after an infection is not the case. People have gotten reinfected even by the same strain of COVID like 3 or 4 weeks after one infection, they just get reinfected again. So just because you got sick with it before doesn't mean that you can't catch it again. You absolutely can catch it again. Again, staying up to date on vaccines and also masking. The mask is like plan A. The vaccine is plan B. In case you have a mask failure, you have the vaccine to keep your immune system primed somewhat, because just getting sick with the virus itself takes a harder toll on your body than what you get exposed to from the vaccine. But yeah, plan A is the mask. In N95 we trust. You can even go further to a P100 mask, but the N95s are pretty good and effective, and that's, as long as you're doing at least that should serve you pretty well. So yeah, you got to keep the COVID out of your body, because as far as what it's going to do when it gets in there, it's going to be pretty destructive. And again, it's coming back, and that's what I was talking about, immunity. Okay. So you want to keep the virus out of your body because you can just keep getting reinfected and reinfected and reinfected, and every time you do, it's going to cause some damage. So, however, while it is possible for people to get reinfected after 1 month or 2, what we're probably seeing in this lull is a lot of people got infected over the winter, and then the virus receded for a while because people were not in sort of prime, ready to be infected status. But even what little temporary immunity you got from the virus is probably now wearing off because it's been 6 months. And, even the vaccine doesn't protect for that long. So there's a lot of problems here. And basically, the solution in the end is we have to stop the spread, because the vaccines are a good plan B, but it doesn't mitigate all damage. And again, stopping the spread, masking, and all that kind of thing is really plan A. Otherwise, we're just going to probably watch this virus keep coming back and keep coming back, and maybe it'll come back with some highly lethal mutation. Maybe it will end up recombining. For example, there was a case of MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, another coronavirus, also known as camel fever, I think, because it often infects camels, as the name would suggest. But yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll swap some genes with that if somebody catches both, and then, that could spread. That has like about a 35% mortality rate or death rate as of right now. So, whether that drops as more people get infected, even if it drops to 20%, you're talking about 1 in 5 people. That's a horrendous situation. We're not there yet, but let's never get there. You know what I mean? This is not just something you can treat as an afterthought, like, let it spread and then we'll deal with it later. Well, this is the result of letting it spread, or letting it rip, as they said, and then trying to deal with it later. It just doesn't get dealt with. Biden said, I have a plan to shut down the virus, not the economy. Well, how did that work? It didn't work at all, because from what I recall, Biden came in 2021, and then we've had more COVID than ever since then, actually. So he didn't shut down the virus at all. It's continued to mutate, continued to spread, and that is where we're at. So, don't be a blue MAGA person that's just like, well, Trump's out of office, and that's all I care about. No. You should care about the issues no matter who's in office. And, anyway, both parties represent the same basic class interests. Anyway, the very rich. All right. So a little bit of a BioBot COVID update. Now, I was talking about, comments and people being in contact. I just wanted to mention my least favorite type of comment, or one of my least favorite. It's like top 3 or bottom 3 comments, is unsolicited production advice from people I don't know. Got a commenter who's like, oh, you need to make short videos and do this and that. And it was just all this, like, the guy in the beret with the megaphone just stepped out of his director's chair and came into my comment section. I was like, buddy, I don't know you. Get lost. There's a reason that I've been running this channel for 3.5 years now. There's a reason we do the kinds of things we do and not other things. I don't like chopping up the streams into bit segments. You know what I get when I do that? Tons of comments from people who obviously didn't watch the video. So I do gear the content more to the admittedly fewer people who are going to sit down and watch the whole thing, but I don't care. I'd rather have fewer people watch it carefully than lots of people just react to the title of the video, which is exactly what happens every time I have posted some excerpt. They just react to the title, and especially when it has to do with current events. And it's just like, no, I'm moderating the comments. I don't need that fucking extra work. That's ridiculous. So if you're considering giving some unsolicited production advice, don't. If you want to stay on my good side anyway. But seriously, it's so obnoxious. Anyway, what else do we have today? Kind of wrapping up some of the threads that we started a few streams ago. So we were talking about the UFO hearing that was in front of Congress. And so I did actually yesterday finish watching it. I had watched everything up to the last hour of it previously. And I have to say I didn't gain a single thing from watching the final hour. Just complete and utter horseshit. But I was mentioning how this is kind of like a QAnon crossover event. First of all, you want to know what Grush said, the main guy who did most of the speaking? I can sum it up for you. I'd be happy to tell you that in a closed session. He basically couldn't say anything in front of the more public setting there. So it was a complete waste of time as far as watching this thing. Although he was saying that there are, quote, biologics which were non-human and possibly extraterrestrial, but possibly other dimensional. And they were like, have you seen these yourself? And he's like, no. He said he's actually never seen any craft. So it's just there's something real funny going on here. But I mentioned Paulina Luna. So here's an article. This is from, I think, Media Matters, and it's from October 2020. Florida GOP congressional candidate Paulina Luna appeared on a QAnon program and praised the hosts, written by Eric Hananoki. So she was one of the people, she got elected, and she was one of the people, Republicans, leading these hearings. So let's read this brief article about her background, and maybe it'll give us some insight into what's going on. Right-wing commentator and GOP-backed congressional candidate Anna Paulina Luna previously appeared on a QAnon program where she praised the hosts and tried to get support for her campaign. Numerous Republican candidates and organizations have attempted to appeal to QAnon supporters during this election cycle. Luna, who is running for Congress in Florida's 13th congressional district against incumbent Democratic Representative Charlie Crist, is the chairperson of Hispanic initiatives at PragerU, there you go, and the former director of Hispanic engagement for Charlie Kirk's Turning Point or Toilet Paper USA. After she won her primary in August, Fox 13 Tampa Bay wrote that she, quote, is quickly becoming a rising star in the GOP. Luna has received support from President Donald Trump and is part of the National Republican Congressional Committee's Young Guns recruitment program. In 2019, as the Tampa Bay Times reported, quote, she led a panel discussion on border security at an event hosted by We Build the Wall, the nonprofit whose leaders were indicted in August on charges that they had defrauded donors. Luna also appeared on the May 21st edition of the Common Sense Show on the Patriots Soapbox Network, which is devoted to pushing the QAnon conspiracy theory. QAnon is based on cryptic posts to online message boards from an anonymous user. Sounds really great when you break it down, because as somebody who's been using internet and like BBS forums forever, the amount of just absolute crap that gets posted on them, like why you would elevate this, is just nuts. Anyway, QAnon is based on cryptic posts to online message boards from an anonymous user known as Q, which have spread rampantly on social media and among fringe right-wing media. QAnon conspiracy theorists essentially believe that Trump is secretly working to take down the purported, quote, deep state, a supposed cabal of high-ranking officials who they claim are operating pedophile rings. The FBI has labeled the conspiracy theory as a potential domestic terror threat. So, while it is true that there are covert intelligence agencies and covert operations within above-board visible intelligence agencies, the deep state thing is something more akin to a concept that is pushed by fascists over the last century or so that fascism has existed. It's not that they're getting rid of these agencies. As like a lot of people, you may recall there was that ridiculous thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene attacking the FBI just because they went after Trump. And people are like, she wants to abolish the FBI, we should take this opportunity. She doesn't want to abolish the FBI, she's just mad they went after Trump. The deep state thing, it's nothing about changing the system fundamentally. They just want to get the old guard out and put their people in. This is, again, a thing common among fascist movements over time. It's not new. Anyway, NBC News reported in August 2018 that the Patriots Soapbox Network is a, quote, round-the-clock live-streamed YouTube channel for QAnon study and discussion. The channel is, in effect, a broadcast of a Discord chat room with constant audio commentary from a rotating cast of volunteers and moderators. The Daily Beast also reported that the network, quote, has been one of the most vocal QAnon outlets since the conspiracy theory began, with a series of anonymous clues posted by a mysterious user, Q, in October 2017. YouTube recently banned the network's main account as part of its belated crackdown on QAnon content. Luna's interview is no longer available on YouTube. A separate account that posts episodes of the Common Sense Show is currently still online, but it doesn't include her appearance. During Luna's appearance on the program, Luna began by stating, quote, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super glad to finally be able to reach out and talk to you guys. It's been actually incredible. Her day has been actually incredible. And it's a special political climate. Just see so much stuff on the campaign trail. So being on with you guys and talking to other, good conservative Republicans, it definitely gives me hope for the future, that's for sure, unquote. Luna did not directly discuss QAnon during the interview. She did delve into conspiratorial rhetoric, including suggesting that Democrats have, quote, so much control of the media, when you have such a favoritism in digital, and then you look at the grand scheme of things and why they're pushing these massive mail-in voting across the nation. I mean, I don't trust them to not fix the election in favor of Joe Biden, unquote. So she was already pushing that even before the election, and there you go. She concluded her interview by promoting her social media account and website. During Luna's interview, information about QAnon was displayed on screen, and after her interview ended, the hosts talked about QAnon. Numerous Republican candidates have appeared on the Patriot Soapbox Network during the 2020 campaign, including congressional candidates Lauren Boebert, Representative Jody Hice, Rich McCormick, and Burgess Owens. Trump campaign official Aaron Perrine went on the show last year to recruit campaign volunteers. Business Insider recently reported that, quote, GOP political strategists acknowledged in interviews with Insider that Republicans view QAnon believers and the movement not as a liability or as a scourge to be extinguished, but as a useful band of fired-up supporters. While they're careful not to embrace QAnon explicitly, these Republicans said, they make sure not to adopt messages that would alienate what has become a key part of the Republican coalition, unquote. So in other words, basically doing every sort of appealing to the far right and, fascist underground. They don't come right out and say it. Although if you watch these hearings, the other guy from Tennessee, another Republican, Burchett, I think was his name, he promoted, as I mentioned in one of the earlier streams, he promoted the guy who broke into Area 51 by name. They're clearly marketing themselves as friendly to these people. And this is what happened basically after, the last sort of, quote, normal Republican administration was Bush and Cheney, 2001 to 2009. They completely burned the brand of the sort of established normal Republicans. John McCain got kind of trounced after that, as did Mitt Romney. Trump came back. How? Well, what happened in 2009, like basically the winter 2008, 2009, that transition? Well, there was the economic crash and then the AstroTurf Tea Party. The Tea Party then, throughout 2009 and 2010, gave rise to a whole crop of pseudo-populist, libertarian, extreme right-wingers that took Congress, and there was that whole default thing in 2010. Rand Paul came in during that time. So this is basically after the Bush-Cheney wing of the Republican Party, lost massive popularity because Bush and Cheney were completely hated. I mean, they made like torture a recognized open part of the 21st century U.S. government. People reacted against that, at least superficially, and correctly identified those things as wrong. At least a significant chunk of the country did. And so they were like, well, shit, our brand is burned. What are we going to do? Who's going to be the new face of the Republican Party? And so they went with the Tea Party. That's what they did. They were like, we need to do the pseudo-populist thing where we tap all of the wackos that have been, we need them all to come out of the woodwork now. They've been waiting in the wings. There's, these sovereign citizens, super patriots, like all these people. We need them to come out now. And, this is the Republican Party burning itself down. In the 80s, they had to expand the coalition, especially after Nixon. They had to expand the coalition to the evangelicals and the moral majority. So you saw that under Reagan. And then they have to keep digging deeper and deeper, scraping the bottom of the barrel harder and harder to come up with some kind of popular support, actual numbers to support their party. And so now we're at the extreme, basically just fascist right at this point. And again, that the seeds of this were clearly there, about, what's it been now, like 15 years ago with the Tea Party, which then Trump started manipulating that with the birther thing, and then he rode that all the way to the White House, and now they're continuing to do it. And that was throughout the UFO hearings, was like just, again, more winks and nods to the utter crazies out there that they can, and it might not all be fascist people. It might just be people with, poor critical thinking in general. And they're like, oh, the Republicans are being friendly to me. Well, I'm apolitical. Maybe I can go, support them or whatever. They're very politically naive. There's another channel I saw talking about this. I will mention by name, FranLab. Fairly large channel, like I think almost 300,000 viewers. I'm not really particularly a fan of the channel, but I see the videos from time to time, and it's just this Gen X woman who is into like creative sort of science crafts. I don't know. She makes a lot of stuff and does sort of science experiments and things, but is also like a sort of a stereotypical UFO nerd, and was sort of getting way into this. And it's like I could totally see people like that who really aren't political, not especially well educated in anything pertaining to this, getting sucked into it that way. And anyway, they keep scraping deeper and they keep coming up with stuff for now. I don't know if this will dry up at some point, but it's clear that they're trying to do that. So, coming down to just a few more topics. We were talking the other day about the Amazon labor union, and somebody mentioned that there's a suit going on. There's some kind of dispute within the Amazon labor union. So I did find an article about this, and here it is, Labor Notes. Reform Caucus rises and sues for elections in the Amazon labor union by Luis Feliz Leon. This is from about a month ago, July 10. I missed this at the time, but let's read. 1 year after the landmark union victory at Amazon's JFK 8 warehouse on Staten Island, New York, the brightly colored posters that once adorned the glass at the iconic bus stop in front of the plant are gone. This was the bus stop from which Chris Smalls, Derek Palmer, Connor Spence, Gerald Bryson, Jordan Flowers, and others launched an insurrection that won an unprecedented union authorization election at the 8,000-worker warehouse. The posters have been replaced by a torn letter dated January 17, 2023, asking the company's lawyers to begin bargaining and recognize the Amazon Labor Union, or ALU, as the exclusive bargaining agent. But Amazon is still refusing to recognize the union, much less begin negotiations. And elections to unionize other facilities with ALU have been unsuccessful so far. In the face of this stalemate, two approaches have emerged, and they are in conflict. The current leadership, including Smalls, seems dedicated to assisting members individually, and for a while emphasized supporting other warehouses attempting to organize. The other approach, advocated by the 80-worker ALU Democratic Reform Caucus, is to increase the heat on the shop floor to push for a contract. Now let me just add, this is typically what you do. If management won't come to the table, and we'll get here later on, the National Labor Relations Board has issued complaints to Amazon that they are not bargaining in good faith, which is an unfair labor practice. You're not allowed to do that. You have to come to the table. It is typical, after you have formed the union and have workers actually organized in it, if you're not getting recognition and they won't deal with you, then you flex some muscle. You show your power on the shop floor and you make them deal with you. So anyway, today the caucus filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court in Brooklyn to, quote, reform ALU's constitution and to hold an election for officers, according to a press release. Let me just comment again, that isn't always what happens. Every union may decide differently what they want their strategy to be, but that's not an uncommon thing, is what I'm trying to say. Undemocratic and illegal. Caucus members say that they've run into conflict with the existing union board, which was self-selected at the beginning of the fight and has appointed new members to its own ranks, but has never been put to a vote. That's not so good. Before resorting to a lawsuit, caucus members say they spent 8 months on internal efforts to reform the union's governance and hold elections for key leadership posts. That effort was capped off by a failed attempt at mediation by veteran labor educator and organizer Bill Fletcher Jr. The ALU board had agreed to mediation and even suggested Fletcher as a mediator, then reversed course and rejected mediation before it could begin. Quote, I am concerned that the apparent turmoil within the ALU executive board means that little is being done to organize the workers and prepare for the battle with Amazon, wrote Fletcher in a memo to the caucus and board after the mediation plan fell through. Quote, it is clear that the ALU's leadership must be reorganized and reaffirmed by the membership. You really don't want your workers, the members of the union, building up resentments, turning on the whole thing. That's, people start quitting, and it can fall apart that way. if people hate the leadership and don't feel that they can change it. Continuing, the caucus characterizes the union's organizational structure as, quote, undemocratic and illegal. Members never had a chance to ratify the Constitution, they argue. The union was slated to hold elections after the NLRB certified its victory in the authorization election at JFK 8, but the Constitution was amended by the leaders to allow for an election to take place only after the union ratified a contract. That goal seems farther away now than ever, although on July 12, the NLRB did issue a complaint against Amazon for its failure to bargain with ALU. So in other words, the current board of the ALU is saying that they're not going to hold elections until after there is ratification of a contract, but Amazon is refusing to deal with them, so they're not going to get a contract in the near future. So the whole thing is at a stalemate, and the executive board has shifted the goalposts for changing who is in leadership until after a seemingly currently unattainable goal is achieved. So, not great. Not looking good here. A shift in union culture. Caucus members say that they're leading the organizing inside the warehouse with a bench of 50 active organizers and hundreds of supporters. Their goal is to build power to win a strong contract. Quote, in order to do the kind of organizing necessary to take on Amazon and get a strong contract, democracy is key, said Connor Spence, a co-founder of the union and its former treasurer, via text message. Rank and file workers need to be engaged, this is continuing the quote, collaborating on strategy, surveying demands, and engaging in shop floor action. Most importantly, they need to have a say in who their leaders are, unquote. Brima Silla, one of 86 plaintiffs in the lawsuit and a member of the Reform Caucus, counterposed that vision to what he described as a union whose leadership now kicks members out of its Wednesday worker committee meetings when they raise questions. Again, if these characterizations are accurate, that's really bad. Eventually meetings became bi-weekly, and then in May they stopped altogether, Spence said. Quote, they were not getting the quorum. So quorum is the minimum number of people in attendance for a vote to count. So if only 2 people show up, you're not meeting quorum, therefore no binding decisions can be made. So, quote, they were not getting the quorum, which is 10 active workers, said Silla. Instead of going to membership meetings, he said, workers started going to the bus stop. Silla, an immigrant from Liberia, worked the night shift in the lead up to the historic election at JFK 8. He was key in organizing the yes vote among the African workers. He used to teach high school economics and world history at a private school on Staten Island, but he lost his job during the pandemic and came to Amazon to support his wife and 4 children. Silla said that he's been taken aback by the level of disrespect and yelling aimed at rank-and-file union members by the union's leadership. Quote, Amazon never respected us, he said, but one of the key principles of ALU's scrappy organizing culture was that the union, by contrast, did show respect, or did for a while. Quote, we created our own culture, said Smalls at a People's Forum event last year. Amazon has its own culture that is completely run on metrics, numbers, no human interaction. We, the union, interacted. We brought a human aspect to it. We cared for one another. We showed the workers every day that we cared for them. Even if they disliked us, we didn't argue. We didn't sit there and get into fights. We stuck to the issues and built off of that commonality. Very good for a union organizing campaign. Service versus organizing. Spence describes the union's current orientation as servicing the members. Quote, workers see the executive board and staff as the union, he said via text message. Everyone is appointed by the board, from stewards up to officers, and there's a huge emphasis on, quote, offering things, such as connecting people with a workers' comp attorney, workers' compensation if you get injured on the job, you're entitled to pay and things, rather than having organizing conversations, identifying issues, recruiting leaders, and organizing shop floor actions. So it sounds like the people in this Democracy Caucus are pushing for a more inclusively active union environment, not just a board of, half a dozen people who are reaching out to individual people. Then you're just basically replacing the HR department, basically. That's not really, a union is the workers, not the executive board. So He said the shift began once Evangeline Byers, a former officer at Transport Workers Union Local 100, became the union's director of organizing. Byers told the New York Times in March that having an election would be pointless because the reformers would win. Oh my God. Is it going to be democratic? No, she told the Times. Connor and them are just going to come into power. But they're going to come into power through an election, so that actually is democratic. So you've got, we need to sort of kill the labor movement as it is now. We need to replace the existing labor movement, which has been in decline for 50 to 60 years, with a fresh, active, militant, industrial unionist model, and bringing this old concessionist, the union brass run everything model is not going to fucking cut it. Obviously, Taft-Hartley legislation that was anti-union, and the Red Scare, both of which were in the years immediately following World War II, were instrumental in undercutting the growing labor movement so that it peaked in 1960 and then has been in decline ever since, more or less. So, for the last 10 or so years, it's been kind of level at the bottom. Like, it just can't get any lower than that. And then in the last few years, you've seen a few percentage points of, what percentage of the private sector in the U.S. is unionized. But it's just starting to come back, and we're not going to get anywhere by using that dead neoliberal union model. It's not going to work. So anyway, that seems to be a factor here. Gerald Bryson, one of the original co-founders of ALU, also argued that the reform push is about Spence, telling Labor Notes, quote, "This whole thing is about Connor Spence being in charge. They'd rather tear it all down because Connor isn't in charge." 86 people? I don't know. And, even if that's the case, they're 86 to like 8. So, maybe it just rightfully does more belong to them. And tear it all down. Is that what they're actually doing? Is that a fair characterization? I don't know about that. He pointed to a December membership meeting where caucus members walked out. Quote, "Somewhere along the line they lost that mission that the union is about the people," he said, "because they left and walked out on us. They abandoned their posts." David Desiree Sherwood, who joined the union last June, said that members walked out of that membership meeting because Smalls had presented an illegally changed constitution. Okay, so that may be a valid reason. Quote, "We were told that this is the Constitution now," he said. "We're not allowed to vote on it." These were his words exactly. If you don't like it, there's the door. There was an article last year, "Is Chris Smalls the future of labor in the U.S.?" Based off of this, I hope not. Because this has more in common with the dead labor movement that we're trying to come out of. Bryson also invoked the racial composition of the caucus to discredit what he describes as, quote, 7 white people in a majority black workplace. The lawsuit filed today has 86 Amazon workers signed on as plaintiffs. Quote, "The majority of the people who walked out during the December meeting were people of color," said Sherwood, who's Filipino. Quote, "Also, the caucus as it currently stands is extremely diverse, so it's a claim that really doesn't have any merit," unquote. Bryson questioned the wisdom of even having a caucus. Quote, "Caucuses are formed when you have a contract and you want to change things." Or in this case, where the majority of the union, or at least like a significant portion of the organized, like very active union, feels that the current executive board, much smaller, is not doing what needs to be done. So if we believe at all in workers' democracy here, this is something that needs to be addressed. It seems like very disingenuous defenses here by the executive board. Quote, "At the end of the day, unions are supposed to be democratic organizations that make sure workers have their voices heard," said Sherwood. "And we're not seeing that in the slightest with how things have been operating. I'm a huge supporter of the caucus and the movement to have elections and let people decide democratically who they want to lead the union and lead the fight against Amazon," unquote. Yeah, you would think that's how it works. Instead, you seem to have the executive board squatting in the little hall of power that they have established. Not so great. Asked about the failed meditation, Bryson said that the problem was that Fletcher set the ground rules and decided who could be part of the effort. Co-founder Jordan Flowers and a former JFK 8 worker, Tristan Lyon, couldn't be involved. According to the caucus, the only people excluded from mediation were ALU staff, and the sticking point was their demand to hold a leadership election. Michelle Valentin-Nieves, the ALU's vice president, directed all questions to one of the union's attorneys. Okay. Did you really win? Last week, when I visited JFK 8 to interview workers, no one mentioned Smalls by name, but they remembered fondly the culture of solidarity and care, the sharing of food, and organizers responding to worker complaints outside the warehouse or in the cafeteria. Talk of the union was on everyone's lips as they waited at the bus stop after their shift or took a break on benches outside the facility. In more than 20 interviews, the issues that rose to the top were workplace conditions and Amazon's refusal to bargain. Kenny Ortuga said that he voted for ALU because he wanted a boost in pay and more time off. He continues to support the union and blames Amazon for stonewalling. Quote, Amazon is trying to play down the efforts of the union, he said. Amazon is big, and they will resist as long as they can, unquote. Brianna Lewis remembered when the ALU began organizing. She had just started working at Amazon. Quote, the union was everywhere, she said. They're outside in front of the building. They were making calls. A constant refrain among workers, if a problem arose, was go to the ALU people. They'll help you with whatever. Now I feel like it dried out. The labor union won, but I feel like, yeah, they won on paper. Amazon is still standing, and they barely speak about the labor union inside. So did you really win? Believe me, the reality is if you really won, you would know it. So yeah, that rhetorical question cuts through loud and clear. The Mammoth Warehouse now employs somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 workers. The Reform Caucus gathered 822 signatures on a petition calling for an election of ALU leadership. Okay, that's significant. You can't really ignore that. 822 signatures. The reformers say that they've never been better organized in the warehouse, and despite the internal discord, workers still want their union, just one that actually brings the fight to Amazon. Time off task, this is the last screen. The working conditions have only gotten worse with write-ups for time off task, TOT, i.e. any moment that is not spent working. Wow. Handheld radio frequency scanners track and record workers' productivity down to the minute, and managers use this information to punish workers who fall below their quotas. So yeah, I remember seeing this a couple of years ago. They literally have on the Amazon workers like bracelets, I think it is, that like track like your exact hand movements and stuff. It's crazy. Anyway, if your stomach hurts and you're in the bathroom, they'll write you up for TOT, time off task. It's write-up after write-up. Sometimes the write-ups come as surprises. Quote, I've known plenty of people who've gotten fired over write-ups that they never even knew about, she said. So this is typical when a company's trying to break the union. They just resort to sheer terrorism. Just trying to terrorize the activists into just fleeing. This is exactly very, very typical what Amazon's doing. Felicia Price has only been here for 3 months. Turnover is sky high. Like many of her coworkers, she had worked for Amazon before, but in another warehouse. To make it to the far west of Staten Island, she commutes 3 hours from Coney Island. Though she hasn't connected with the ALU yet, she said that she wants to get involved. It would be good to have a shop steward in meetings with management to get accommodations. Quote, we need a union, she said. If my doctor is saying that I can't perform this certain activity, I shouldn't have to argue and go back and forth with management about what my doctor's note is saying. Fiannan Barkley voted for the union last year and then left Amazon. She's been working there on and off since the facility opened in 2018. The day of my visit happened to be her first day back, and she was a bit anxious, pacing back and forth by the bus stop. But she's kept up with the news through the Citizens app and talking with other members of Staten Island's tight-knit Liberian community. Barkley said Amazon, quote, wants everything out so fast. It's orders, 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 orders. But at the end of the day, when we clock out, she made heaving sounds like an exhausted worker struggling to catch her breath, we're tired, and what are we getting out of it? You see me in my scrubs, she asked, telling me about her second job as a home health aide. I'm coming from a whole other job, and it shouldn't be like that. I should be able to stick with just one company. So there you go. That's some of what's going on, between the workers at Amazon, between the workers and the executive board, which seems to be perpetuating itself over objections at this point. And interesting situation. We'll see where it goes. I think that is the latest update so far in that situation. So there's a look inside one of the sort of most standout names within the labor movement today, and it seems to be stuck in place, stalled. So, as I've said before, this is a channel where we're studying Marxism, specifically anti-revisionist Marxism-Leninism, and that's well and good. It's important for understanding how radical revolutionary social change comes about, and this is fundamentally what Marxism is about. But it is a workers' movement, and without a strong militant revolutionary labor movement, you're never really going to have the outgrowth of it, which is the conquest of state power. So the foundation, of course, is organized workers in strong labor unions that actually exert significant muscle and are capable of shutting down the economy as needed. And it's workers who are class conscious, by virtue not just of book studies, but of flexing their muscle on the shop floor and doing the organizing, and actually, having been involved in those campaigns that can really sharpen class consciousness, because you see who's on what side and how different interests will waffle, and who's really in it to win it and who isn't. So that is the core of it. The sort of political movement to capture state power, which is connected with this, unless you got a solid air tank there, your balloon is going to be deflated. And that's what we've got. We've got a weak labor movement right now. And so any left political party, from the Greens to PSL to whoever, whether it's a mass party or more of a vanguard party, those efforts are just going to fall flat, most likely, until you've got a serious labor movement going and much more widespread class consciousness. Now, it doesn't help at all, which was the idea of it. As I mentioned before, that legally the labor movement is pretty much gutted and has been for 75 years since Taft-Hartley. Just whether it's the closed shop not being a thing, there's all kinds of tactics that actually work, which are now illegal, and that's why they're illegal. And like I said, we've seen the labor movement just get destroyed in the decades following that. And that's not because workers suddenly decided that they loved capitalism. It is because it is so hard. I mean, it's a complex thing. There's obviously more than one factor. But a lot of it is just it's so hard to form and maintain an effective union that actually does anything. So anyway, Cornel West is in the news here and there. He is the presumptive, although I want to emphasize the Greens aren't having their presidential primary for another 11 months, I think. So he's the presumptive presidential candidate for the Green Party, but somebody could run against him. And he's out there. Apparently somebody said he was on Lee Camp's live stream recently and referred to himself as a council communist. What? If you look this up, I see no other references to Cornel West being a council communist. So this is, I think, news to everyone, including Cornel West. Council communism is not really a thing we cover on the channel. It is, in my opinion, basically rebranded anarchism. It is viciously not just critical of, but hostile to Marxism-Leninism. And like I said, it just reads like rebranded anarchism to me. So what's the idea? Workers' councils. Oh, you mean Soviets? Like that's literally what that word means? Yeah, but they don't like the Leninist part of having a vanguard party and so on. And I don't know. I see a lot of just impotent anarchist rage in a lot of the council communist writings, whether it's like Matic or whoever. But it is an anti-Bolshevik trend. And again, it's like fine and good to think like this in theory before you've done any reading, before you know any history. As they say, as the meme goes, anarchism is the highest stage of not doing the reading. Was just talking with a commenter the other day. He said they used to be an anarchist for way too long and then basically read themselves out of it by actually learning the history of anarchism. Like during the Spanish Civil War, a lot of what they were doing was either, the things that worked were not that dissimilar to the USSR, and the things that differed was like hanging on to imperial ambitions of, colonies in Africa and things like that. So, yeah, anarchism. So, what I was saying is that it's nice in theory to say, oh, we don't need a vanguard party. Okay, great. There's, a little bit less organizing that we have to do. Except, like in the case of the Russian Revolution, had it not been for the Bolsheviks and some of their allies in the left wing of the SR, Socialist Revolutionary Party, what was the direction that the Soviets were going in those elections with the other, like the Mensheviks and other interests in there? They were basically just going to support the provisional government, and then you would have capitalism in Russia, and there wouldn't have been, any of the Soviet project. So when you actually examine it, it just kind of falls apart. Anyway, this guy, Maddock in particular, lived through the 70s and kept writing. But it's like you read some of the stuff and you just wonder. It comes off as disingenuous because I can't imagine a person in that situation, isn't familiar with more of the history. I mean, he was directly involved in some of these efforts and then, kind of abandoned them for more of this like left-com sort of leaning into anarchist position. But anyway, Cornel West is now a council communist, I guess, according to that. I haven't seen the stream myself, but we have to do better than this. And like I said, this is a result of a not very class-conscious left. It's the result of a weak labor movement. You get these kind of frauds, honestly, that is not going to get the left anywhere. So why do we study Marxism? We were just covering this in the last office hour stream. I would say to solve political problems in the here and now. And I would say that basically you can break it down into like two categories. One, what are the tasks of the left at the present time? And then two, studying the history and coming to an understanding of what has happened over the 175 years of Marxism and maybe the more broadly 200 years of socialist and anarchist struggle or anti-capitalist struggle more broadly. So you do need to come to positions on the history, but you also need to establish tasks for current efforts. I think something like a left Congress of the existing left political parties is something, because I don't think that any of the parties on their own can really do it. But also the rebuilding of the labor movement, without which all of this is theoretical, all of this is hypothetical. You can't really do anything. None of these parties can do anything without at its core, this is a workers' movement, and the main workers' organizations are labor unions, but not the kind of sellout concessionist labor unions that we have become used to in the last half century. And they've existed longer than that as well, but really militant, effective labor unions, and still really struggling to get a footing there. So if you support, whether it's the Greens or PSL or CPUSA or any of the other various parties floating around there, or you're not party affiliated and you just consider yourself somebody who wants to see socialism, maybe isn't aligned with any of the parties, major task is labor union support and just witnessing the rebuilding of the labor movement. This is absolutely critical. In the meantime, I think we're going to get honestly kind of embarrassing political representation of more people from the sort of grifter media sphere than actually people coming out of, historically, the socialist and communist parties were led by actual labor leaders, people who had been in the trenches. Eugene Debs was a long-time labor leader involved in major strikes, helped to found the IWW in 1905, and other people like William Z. Foster. These were people who came from serious industrial union activity. And as we don't have a serious movement to, on that level, we don't have those people that are rising to prominence as, heroes of the working class or the obvious political leaders of the working class, because we don't have that movement going. And, we haven't had that trial by fire of like, who are the real leaders who actually got results on the shop floor in the industries, who was able to do it? Let's make that person, the political leader for those who at least have a taste for that. That's key. So if you don't have that movement, you're not going to generate those people. As I say, weak struggle makes a weak vanguard. The vanguard just being that portion of the working class which is more class conscious. There's, the backward masses, the middle masses, the advanced masses, the vanguard. It's just a relative term for, how class conscious are you. The vanguard doesn't mean perfect, the perfected human, sort of elite worker. It just means like the most class conscious. So poor struggle, poor vanguard. And I think that's definitely where we're at. And so instead of, hardened labor leaders coming from the trenches of like, I just led the steel strike or whatever, you're instead getting people, well, first of all, the labor unions such as they are mostly attached to the Democratic Party. That absolutely has to change. It's a fundamental task. I mean, like top 3 task for the U.S. left to separate from, and that includes, when I say U.S. left, that includes the labor unions, to separate from the Democratic Party. And those who won't need to be identified as not friends of the working class or the movement for socialism. And, that's a major thing, rebuilding the labor movement, and then, looking for tasks of the non-Democratic Party actual left from there. And we can look to history for many examples of similar situations. It's worth doing the historical study. We also need the present-day struggle. These feed and inform each other, just like in any other kind of science. There's experimentation, hypothesis, experimentation, hypothesis. Out of these repeated observations and refining the hypotheses, you develop a theory about what's going on that seems to hold up with repeated experimentation and observation. So social science is no different, and that's what we're looking at here. But yeah, in the meantime, rather than the sort of, ex-labor leader political socialist, movement, we get more the, social worker, lawyer, teacher, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with these things in and of themselves, but it's more the sort of social activist type of thing. And ultimately, that's just not the core driver of the movement. It's important, but we got to get back to, the organized workers generating leaders through struggle. And I think you'll see a shift in the kind of socialist leadership that, we'll see then in the parallel movement to conquer state power. So wanted to mention that as well. All right, so let's get into the chat now, and we will wrap it up probably with chat, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of the stream. So I look forward to S4A doing Lenin's Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Looking forward to the commentary on that. Yeah, it is coming up. It will probably be a few more months at least before we get to that. I have some other mini-series planned, and then we definitely will be doing it, though. Blue Sky is cool as a Twitter alternative, but it's hard to get back into the communities I was in again. Give it time. I mean, a lot of people just aren't on there yet because it's still in invite-only mode, but give it time. Yeah. It's my birthday Monday. Proud to say I made it to 21 without ever downloading Twitter. Yeah, I mean, don't start now. I'm honestly borderline terrified about the current COVID surge because my grandpa has double pneumonia right now. That's really bad, and he needs to not catch COVID for sure. I mean, maybe, are you sure he doesn't have it right now? Because, I mean, there are cases, he could be one of the people that constitute the current uptick. Blue MAGA has gone full mask off, literally, on COVID. Yeah. Do I have international wastewater data? Not from this site. I think each country, handles that separately. COVID affects the hippocampus in a really bad way. It's a part of the brain. So most people who've had it can experience significant loss in memory function and such. Yeah. Yeah, it also, we did an article maybe a year and a half ago about COVID being shown to attack the brain stem. So your brain stem, that's one of the parts of the brain we have in common with many other animals, down to like lizards. And it controls a lot of autonomic functions. So things that happen automatically, like your heart beating and your breathing and things like that. So when you get disruption of your autonomic functions that you don't have to put conscious effort into, like your heart beating, that is called dysautonomia. It can mean irregular heartbeat. It can mean lots of different things. COVID can actually cause irregular heartbeat, palpitations, arrhythmia, in different ways. It can attack the heart directly. It can infect the heart, cause inflammation and damage to the heart muscle tissue. And it can also sort of attack the control box up in your brainstem. So not good stuff. I had a symptomatic COVID case in May 2022, and my ADHD got way worse. Yeah, that's executive function disruption. And my short-term memory went out the window. Neither have recovered much, if at all. I'm sorry to hear that. This is why we can't just let it rip, and people need to keep masking. Technically, the proper term for an N95 is a respirator, but people hear respirator, they think like, guy in a hazmat suit or something. N95, it looks like a mask, technically a respirator, but that's what we need. You can still get cheap N95s online, and I highly recommend it. Because, you need to be able to think straight. I described this in a previous stream as what happened to me is this may be like a nerdy metaphor, but it's what my mind came up with, so I'm just going to be true to that. So in the old Legend of Zelda game, there's an enemy called the Wall Master. It's just a hand that comes out of the wall, and if it grabs you, it pulls you back to the entrance to the level that you're in. That was what was happening to my thoughts. I would have a thought in my head. I would just have a clear mental picture of whatever it was I was talking about, and it would just get whoop, just like an invisible hand reached out of nowhere, grabbed my thought, and it was gone. That's what was happening to me. And I would know I had been thinking about something, but I would have absolutely no memory of what it was. I feel like I may have gotten, I never had another positive COVID test, but I think I may have had COVID after that because I had another bout of that later. It was much less intense, and that was from before I got any of the vaccines. I got that. I think I got it again post-vaccine, not like immediately after, but like some months after that. I believe I got infected again, possibly, and I had a very similar feeling, and it's like nothing I've ever felt in my life before, but it was much more limited, which is good, but it's good that I didn't go through another full 11 months of that, but I still don't think that I'm the same now as I was before. And that goes for many, many people out there. I was doing my best to avoid it, but I lived with my family at the time, and they didn't care, so we all got it. They brushed it off. I didn't, so mad at them. Yeah, I like to show people this article that I'm putting up on the screen. This was kind of my go-to on Twitter article there. Even mild COVID-19 can cause your brain to shrink. Recent brain imaging shows that the disease can cause physical changes equivalent to a decade of aging, and it can trigger problems with attention and memory. So that's from April 2022. We've known this for well over a year now. And yeah, it causes actual loss of brain mass. This is not something to just fuck around with. It's really, really not. So, I'm going to put the other thing up here. Yeah, that's kind of my go-to. I've had very, very, very few people, when I get into online arguments, or did in the past, because most of them happen on Twitter, I would post that, and people usually shut up at that point. Like, it's hard to look at that and be like, yeah, I don't care if my brain shrinks. Most people look at that and go, I really don't want my brain to shrink, actually. I need that brain. I'm about to attempt driving 2,200 miles without stepping foot inside a building. I have faith in my P100, but I'm not going inside. Oh, I have faith in my P100, but not going inside nearly eliminates risk, and I do a whole lot less consumerisms, enjoy the journey more, can't bring myself to fly. Yeah. Good. Let us know how it goes, Let us know. Yeah, there's a lot of places in the U.S. it's not particularly safe to travel for a variety of reasons, but at least you're protecting yourself from COVID. The connection between Area 51 and alien UFOs was originally a government hoax to hide the fact that Area 51 was actually just a place where they were testing military planes and technology seized from other nations. Yeah, and so this is like a common idea that the alien thing is just used as a distraction from technology. So this was addressed in those hearings head on. One of the congressmen, to his credit, was basically like, so you're telling me that these people can, go billions of miles across space, but then they're going to get to Earth and crash? How does that work? It's a valid question for sure. But they had three witnesses there that were giving this testimony, and they really leaned into like, this is no technology I've ever seen before. It's beyond our current material science capabilities, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, they'll deny it up and down. I don't know. Again, the word I just couldn't get out of my head watching it was horseshit. Matt Gaetz was there. He was one of the ones like insisting this is all real and a big, the government's covering up aliens. And like, actually it was really interesting at one time because they were talking about the safety risks of these things, which so far nobody has been like, there haven't been any in-air collisions or anything reported or anything like that. Although Grush said somebody had been harmed by them. I don't know if he had seen it. Anyway. But this is not really like a major safety hazard, yet they were talking about it, and I was going like, because they were talking about the reporting of, harm to people as the result of UAPs. I was like, if only they could put this much emphasis on well-documented real-world threats like, I don't know, sexual assault in the military, or, any number of other issues that are not sort of, up for debate as to whether they exist or not. Anyway, just utter fucking distraction and horseshit. Didn't the person behind Q come out and say it was all fake? I don't know, but they're just going to move on to the next thing because the people who buy into this, they have a need to buy into something, and so they're just going to buy into something else instead. Media Roots Radio did a great interview with the co-founder of 4chan that exposed a lot of the QBS. I mean, and that's well and good for you and me that aren't interested in it in the first place. For the people who have a desperate need to believe in things, they're just going to move on to something else. So it doesn't matter because the basic issue is a utter lack of critical thinking ability to evaluate evidence, and to sort evidence into different categories of quality. There's just, and maybe just a need to be excited by believing in stuff like that. Who knows? The actual Q posts themselves are fascinating just from a conspiracy hoax perspective. It's interesting how easy it was for this person to basically lead people to riot at the Capitol building. Republicans will appeal to their fascist base, but Democrats won't appeal to socialists at all. Instead, they try to go after conservatives. Tells you everything you need to know. Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is like the saying, scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds. In the end, liberals want to preserve capitalism, and they'd rather align with fascists than align with socialists. They'd rather ally with fascists than ally with socialists, because the interests just are not aligned there. Who will write a book about the national questions on aliens? Lenin didn't know them. Lenin didn't know about them at the time. Yeah, we've got the national question, but we've got the planetary question now. I don't know, ask Posadas. I never appreciated the focus on individual leadership from the left online media crowd. Credit to Smalls for his contributions, but the hero worship is weird to me, misplaced. It's because people are desperate, and also people don't really understand how things work. We've got a culture of people who believe in adventurism in the sense that everything in the dominant culture is about superheroes and a lone individual who rises up and leads the people to freedom. It's not about mass action. It's about maybe at best a small team of people with special abilities who like lead everyone to freedom. So that's that's adventurism basically, and it's action disconnected from the masses, and but again, when you don't have a strong workers' movement, I mean, it kind of sets you up for that, because if you wait around for the workers to do something, currently it isn't happening for a number of reasons. So people who do want to see something happen, I can understand the drive to go out there and do something. In the end, we don't see a lot of these things necessarily sparking larger activity, because the masses, that doesn't seem to be the critical factor in convincing the masses to act, in other words. So it is somewhat more self-indulgent. Not all of it's awful, but not all of it has necessarily direly negative consequences. But I think what is negative is people having this belief in adventurism, superheroism, that basically that kind of model of social change, that like Captain America has to come in and beat up all the bad guys, or the Hunger Games narrative, or like this whole like chosen one idea. That's how like a lot of people think things work, and we as communists have to put out a different message and counter that. Boots Riley's new show, I Am a Virgo, is definitely worth a watch. A good amount of basic theory in there. I actually was just hearing from somebody else that they hated I Am a Virgo. So, I don't know. I guess I haven't watched it. Still collecting opinions, I guess. I also got COVID once from a family member who got it from going to a wedding without masking. He gave it to everyone in the house. Yeah, I know of a wedding recently where like 30 people got COVID. It's ridiculous. And one of them was like a chronic long-term smoker. Very, very dangerous stuff. They survived, but I think they got so sick they decided to quit. They decided to quit smoking as a result of it. It was like that bad. All right, what else? COVID comment follow-up. I'm 27 and in good surface level health, and my family were all in their 60s. Go figure. Yeah, it doesn't really matter how old you are. People get brain damage at all ages from COVID. We read an article, even fit people can end up with pacemakers and stuff like that as a result of a COVID infection. So yeah, I mean, really anybody. I mean, the number of heart attacks has increased significantly. This is a result of COVID infections. It weakens the heart and makes you more prone to having a heart attack. I think it's really telling that when I Googled a Lutheran church in America, I saw a church with people where everyone masked, often with KN95s. You look at these leftists on Twitter and Facebook, zero masks. I don't know. When 95% of public leftists stopped masking, I got the gist of a more realistic view of our situation. Yeah, I mean, a lot of, quote, leftists in the U.S. are not left at all. They're attached at the hip to the Democratic Party, and this is still an ongoing situation that we have to separate out from. It's not just in the U.S. either, but yeah, it is a problem. Regarding the wall mastering of thoughts, or just thoughts disappearing in mid-thought as a result of COVID, experienced my thoughts and memory locationally in my body and nervous system. So for the memory issues, my body will set aside information to be used shortly in a conversation. Now when I go to find it, it isn't there, and I won't remember where I put it. It's so distressing. I've cried a lot over this. My memory was once my greatest asset. Yes, you have my full sympathy. It's very disconcerting. I mean, your mind is kind of like you. Like, that's where you store you, at least, your own experience of you. And absolutely, when you lose access to your own internal thought process, that's a very intimate experience of yourself, and you don't want to lose that. It's like a part of you literally dying. And, you can grieve and adjust and move on, but I mean, that is a loss. So this is a horrible disease we have to stop from spreading. What's this now? You are on Socialism for All. That's what this is now. YouTube.com/Socialism for All is sort of the main channel, but we also stream here. What's this now? Is it actually socialism that's being discussed? Yep, anti-revisionist Marxism-Leninism. I am a democratic socialist from Europe, always fascinated with people calling U.S. Democrats socialists, and in my view, they're pretty far from being socialists. Yeah, so you're correct. I mean, many, quote, democratic socialists in the U.S. are more like social democrats. We did this a few years ago trying to pin down with Bernie Sanders. Was he actually a socialist? Which we set the bar for socialism as, do you want to end capitalism? Or do you merely want to keep capitalism, but just make it, more equitable for certain periods of time, at least, because the capitalists will roll back those reforms. Capitalists don't like to share. I know, big shock. But they don't like to share, and as soon as it's politically feasible for capitalists to roll back their concessions that they've made to the working class, they will do so. So yeah, it was unclear with Bernie Sanders what his long-term position was, whether capitalism needed to go or not. I mean, we're not democratic socialists in the sense of believing that socialism can be voted in through the bourgeois democratic process. So let me ask you, what do you mean by democratic socialist? You say you're a democratic socialist from Europe. What does that mean to you? How do you define your socialism? Because we did videos on this early in the channel, like I said. Democratic socialist seems to mean different things to different people. Some people were like Marxist but anti-Stalinist, and they would call themselves, quote, democratic socialists. So there's all different things. So what does democratic socialism mean to you? Oh yeah. Social democrats are right-wing. They're even more right-wing than they were in 1914. Absolutely. I mean, and this is like, it goes back into the council communism thing. It's like, no, we don't want to do the one thing that has actually worked so far. We're going to do something else. But then that something else never actually works. Okay? And then, they haven't had any more success than Marxist-Leninists have had. So whatever. So the Democratic Socialist has responded, I don't believe in a revolution by force to end capitalism. I like it. There's a very revealing language here. I like it to be voted in a democratic way. So there are very specific reasons why Marxist-Leninists have explained repeatedly why this can't be. Allende is kind of a very good example of democratic socialism. Like, one of the high watermarks of democratic socialism is Allende. And by failing to build the base in the way that Marxism-Leninism proposes, you then have no way of actually upholding socialist rule, after you achieve power through the bourgeois system. So the capitalist government is still there. So I get that you have this preference for people just voting in socialism. The problem is the capitalists do not have a preference of just quietly leaving power. Do you see that? That's the limiting factor that you're up against there. The capitalists are going to bring violence against you in huge, huge measures. All right? So if your movement isn't already built up, not just through voting, but, organized into councils of, it's all the things that Marxism-Leninism proposes. It's going to be very, very easy to remove your socialist politicians from power and then institute a right-wing dictatorship. So that's just what happens. And I might like the idea too of, hey, we won at your game, capitalist government. You have to obey us. They just simply fucking don't. They don't obey it. And they just say, they throw you in jail or whatever. The bottom line is that when capitalism is under threat in any way, they resort to fascism. So you need a workers' movement that is sufficient to overcome the inevitable fascist repression, counter-revolutionary war, and all the things that they're going to do. If you don't build that movement, then you're just setting yourself up to be gutted later. You're setting yourself up for extermination later. That's because you can rely, you can guarantee, you can set your watch by the fact they will do fascism. They will do counter-revolutionary war. They will try to do, genocide, like whatever. They will bring enormous levels of violence against you if you start getting successful. You have to count on that, and organize a movement strong enough to fight back against it. Because otherwise, capitalism is not going anywhere. It just simply isn't. All right, I'm happy to have a bit of a dialogue, but that's basically my answer to that. Yeah, as Sands says, if we vote it in, they will undo it. And they have a million different ways of doing that. I mean, look at U.S. elections, for example. Any non-bourgeois party is just completely shafted. And they even have the fake populist opposition libertarian party in there, which is completely capitalist in every way. But they have them in there as sort of controlled opposition, as the third largest party to soak up some of the discontent, so that nothing really gets organized beyond that. But you can't really effectively do anything in the elections here at this point. Maybe a little bit at the local, maybe county and state level if you get really organized. But I mean, as far as just casual political participation, so far it really hasn't worked at all to do anything. So I don't know, it's only going to take you so far. If you start actually threatening the system at all, they'll just do fascism and kill you. So you actually have to prepare for that. So you might as well just study Marxism-Leninism. All right, so they responded, that's true, it's a dilemma. But here, where is here? Democratic Socialists were in power for 80 to 90 years. Where the hell are you talking about? And kind of built up a semi-socialist society in a democratic way. Where are you talking about? Because I'm not really sure. Oh, Sweden. No, Sweden is not semi-socialist at all. It's a social democracy. Capitalists run it, and it's a client of imperialism. It benefits from the imperialism that the U.S. and other more major military nations impose. The capitalists run your society. So anyway, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I think some of what you see in Sweden, and it's now erupting in the sort of anti-immigrant, racist, fascist right in movement that is popping up in Sweden and in Germany. There's actually just a big protest against AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. Those kind of looked like, I don't know. There was a big march of people calling AfD Nazis, which is accurate. I don't know if their action is going to go beyond name-calling, but there are the beginnings of protests against it. But anyway, the other thing that you need to understand about the golden age of social democracy from like the 1930s up through near the end of the 20th century is the capitalist governments, even the U.S., had to make concessions to the labor movement in order to try to prevent revolution. Why? Because, well, the labor movement existed, but also the international communist movement existed. The mere existence of the USSR put enormous pressure on capitalists to at least make the pretense of listening to their workers. After the destruction of the USSR in the early 90s, plus whatever the hell has been going on with China, they do not feel any such pressure. And we've gone into a severe age of, right-wing reaction and counter-revolution. So that's where we are now. So, but don't mistake that for socialism, is what I'm trying to say. But I appreciate your input. It is interesting. I mean, I think to me that helped me adjust more accurately my own views of what has been going on in 20th century class struggle history in particular. Anyway, but I appreciate that you're open-minded enough to listen to it. So, I've been looking at various organizations in Missouri, and I found a chapter for Revolutionary Blackout Network. Stay away from them. They seem like they want to organize and improve community material conditions. But yeah, they do all the right-wing grifting. Jimmy Dore, Tucker Carlson, who is straight up racist, you're right. My opinions on RBN is that they're fucking garbage. They're opportunists of like the highest degree. And yeah, they want to work with neo-Nazis. Fuck them. Fuck them. Yeah, we've actually commented on that in the past. You can find a bunch of shit about them on Twitter. They're constantly pushing that thing that Jimmy Dore said, that like, oh, we have to work with, like the Black Panther Party used to work with like Southern racists. No, they didn't. The Young Patriots Organization was not racist. They were anti-racist. And you can find a good article about that at yporc.org, yporc.org/YPO intro. The title is Young Patriots Organization and the Original Rainbow Coalition, the Young Patriots Organization, Power to the People. And there's a quote, "Racism was a demon that had to be driven out and slain if we were going to have unity with other groups and to believe that all people have a right to self-determination and freedom. We had to change to make life tolerable and for life to have some sort of meaning." It's a quote from Hy Thurman, a founding member of the Young Patriots. And then the article begins, defying the stereotypes that they were ignorant hillbillies and hopeless racists. Uptown Chicago's Southern migrants, so this was people who came from the South up to Chicago, organized the Young Patriots Organization in 1968. Uptown had some of the worst poverty in the city, and living conditions were grim, with hunger and poor health for many. The Young Patriots, and this is key, grew out of the work of the Uptown Join organization, a unique collaboration between Southern migrants and young radicals from Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. This was a left-wing movement from the beginning and anti-racist, and it has nothing to do with like working with MAGA libertarian fascists. So RBN promotes a lot of just straight up fucking garbage. Extreme opportunism, and they just don't know what they're talking about. Another comment, the political landscape here in Boston is frustrating because it's either hardline, quote, anti-tanky anarchists or socialist alternative Trotskyists that are out here organizing, and they're mostly just sectarian college kids with little hold. Yeah, I mean, no movement should either, be too proud of itself. Like, none of these things really has traction within the broad working class right now. So, again, I thought Bernie Sanders was mobilizing people by the tens of thousands, city after city after city. The unfortunate thing is he led them into the Democratic Party. You would need to do something similar, but outside the Democratic Party. I don't expect Cornel West is going to be doing that, although he is outside the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, an actual political figure. Now, he sold everybody out, don't get me wrong. We've been criticizing that for the last 3.5 years. The point is just, he had an actual political career. It wasn't just a protest vote or some fantasy campaign. He was a congressman and a senator for decades. Like, he could have actually been president, is the point. He was actually qualified for the job, and was rallying people or getting people talking about issues like poverty, hunger, housing, all kinds of things. The whole Medicare for all thing. I mean, it was a positive thing. He was putting a foot in the door for getting it in the media and talking about it. It was a step forward for the very low class consciousness of the average U.S. person. I just don't see Cornel West being able to accomplish that, and for a number of reasons. But anyway, this is where we are now. So none of these groups that are very sectarian, I agree, should be too high and mighty, because nobody really is doing much of anything, to be honest. So there's lots of sympathizers here. I guess I'm one, but things are scattered. Yeah, I think we really have yet to see kind of a meaningful resurgence, and what you get is a lot of just sort of torch passing. A small group passing the torch for every 2 or 3 years, like new organizers take over, but it's always small groups and maybe 5 to 15 people in an area, and it's just sort of a rotating cast of characters. But obviously 5 or 10 people is not, and especially for year after year after year, just not, a deeply embedded working class movement. I don't want to disparage the people themselves. Most of the other leftists I've met here are so lovely, but it's clear how little quality reading anyone has done when I've tried engaging them in conversations. It's something we're trying to change at the channel. I don't hold the pretense that we're a party. S4A is not a party. We are a public-facing, readily accessible sort of quasi-study group. If you want to go to another level and be part of an actual more of like a closed group, Politsturm International is doing work that I've been impressed with so far, and I'm in contact with some people who are active in Politsturm. They are actually doing sort of international Marxist-Leninist study groups. They have a very, if you read their about page, they and I have very similar views on where the movement is at right now. So, but yeah, it's like people need to learn the history, formulate the tasks for the present, and rebuild the labor movement. And maybe from there we can have some kind of power going in a direction that we'd like it to go in. People I talk to, this is the person who's talking about a lot of the people they talk to haven't done the reading. People I talk to will regularly remark, wow, you seem to really know a lot. And meanwhile, I'm here just thinking I've just been listening to S4A for a few years. Like that's where, quote, you seem to know a lot. Yeah, it's amazing what actually just doing the reading can do for you. That's what we're doing here. We're doing the reading, injecting some commentary to make it more engaging and also just so people's eyes don't glaze over from the jargon. But it comes down to just like, what did Lenin actually say? What did Marx actually say? What did Engels actually say? What did Mao actually say? Etc. And just learning that. And like, because it's a finite amount of history. It's a finite amount of years. It's learnable. You know, these struggles happened in a finite amount of countries. You can learn the basic gist of what happened in each country. There's always going to be, you know, sort of different spins and takes on it. But like, you can get the broad strokes. And from there, you can get a sense of what worked, what didn't work, why, at least a few different takes on why, and you know, start to formulate, okay, what kind of position are we in now? And yeah, it's amazing. Like, if you do the reading, you'll actually know what you're talking about, and if you don't, you really won't. You just can't wing this. And I like to make the comparison to chemistry. If you know somebody like, oh, I'm a chemist. Oh, really? Where did you study? Oh no, I don't study. I just kind of do experiments. Yeah, no, that you're not a chemist. Like, really, you need to kind of like at this point particularly, you know, maybe it was different 300 years ago, but like when they were just breaking ground. But at this point, no, you actually have to study the science that has come before, know that history, know the theory of like what has been tried and why, the theory of the class interests and the changes in the means of production, how the technology has changed, and how that's informed the structure, the class composition of society. You do need to know all that if you're going to make any sort of intelligent analysis of the situation, even on a basic level. But yeah, I mean, we have up on the channel reading lists if people want to get into just doing some basic recommended reading. Go to there's like a recommended reading playlist section. Check out some of those. Just even that would be a massive step up over having done none of the reading. You know, listening to like 10 to 20 of those more important books would get you a lot further. Because then you can at least, again, get the really broad strokes and form the basis of additional questions to ask. In other words, you can get new research strains going in your head. Like, okay, well, I know they did this. What I want to know, but don't, is what did they do after XYZ? And then you can ask somebody who does know, and they can be like, oh, you should read this because that's where they explain that. And yeah, so doing the reading definitely matters. All right. Yeah, so going back to the nature of Sweden as a sort of client state of imperialism, the Swedish social democracy is built on wealth extracted from poorer nations. And yeah, no government in Europe outside the Eastern Bloc was socialist. That's the era of social democracy, welfare capitalism. And now we're in the age of neoliberalism. Both are different periods of capitalism. Social democracy meaning capitalism with more rights and concessions being granted to workers. Neoliberalism, which is about from the late 70s to now, is the social counter-revolution crackdown of capitalism with fewer worker rights and fewer concessions, dismantling of the social safety net, etc. And we're now 4 decades into that, 4.5 decades into it, and it's brutal. Different countries are in different places with that, but overall, capital has come back and is squashing the workers in a big way. And again, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So, Sweden has a very high percentage of billionaires and biggest arms producer in the world, and now joined NATO. I didn't know that about them being an arms producer. Sweden managed to keep its labor movement in check by getting rid of some of the unwanted segments in society to America. Interesting. So thereby disciplining their labor movement, sending them to the U.S. That's amazing too. Even in U.S. labor history, what they would do during the first Red Scare, like the teens and 20s, when there were a lot of, there was a big uptick in radical labor organizing during that time. They would just literally put people on boats and just ship them back to Europe. They'd just be like, bye, and go. Like, get out of the country, like, go back to Europe. And that's how they got rid of some of the labor organizers in the U.S. All right, so talking about RBN. Okay, thanks. I was on board with them for a bit, but then I heard them say that mostly average people listen to Tucker Carlson. Now, mostly average people are repulsed by the kinds of neo-Nazi propaganda that Tucker Carlson is putting out, and far-right people actually listen to Tucker Carlson, and that we should try to appeal to them. That was when I became more wary of the whole thing in general. Yeah, you got to look out for everyone in that Jimmy Dore orbit. They're disgusting opportunists. Jimmy Dore wasn't always this bad, but after he got into the 2016 pissing contest with Cenk Uygur over the Hillary-Bernie thing, Dore lost his mind, and he started trying to build up his show based on an audience of like MAGA and libertarians and stuff. He used to have a more progressive outward focus, and that just clearly went out the window for the sake of building a channel that could rival the Young Turks. And I think that's where most of this came from in like 2016, 2017. And now it's been so profitable for him that he's never going to stop. And there's a lot of people in the Dore clout orbit. RBN is one of them. Jackson Hinkle is a regular, or at least was a regular on Jimmy Dore. And if you go into like on Twitter, who's liking their posts, for example, like who is the actual audience this is appealing to? It's all MAGA people. So yeah. Listening to On Contradiction from Mao and Historical Materialism from Stalin pretty much instantly made me more open-minded about these two much maligned figures. Yeah, I mean, that's the basis of a lot of it, is just people, and myself at one time. I got hit by the anti-communist ray gun as well earlier in my life, and remember having conversations about, much, much younger, like a teenager, how evil communism was. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I thought I did because people, teachers that I had considered informed and, considered to know what they were talking about, had, give me the standard American anti-communist indoctrination. And then I later started questioning it, and here we are. And on that note, I'm going to call it a day for this stream. This was an AI free stream. I'm sure some people, we like to mix it up a little. I thought we would just get it all done in one shot. I actually like taking a break, so we'll probably come back to that at some point. It's not like this is the last stream we're going to do, not by far. Again, now that I'm off of Twitter, the unending car crash experience of Twitter actually is easier for me to stream on a somewhat more frequent basis. So, that is that, and you're going to see a lot of Rosa Luxemburg stuff coming up. We'll do another office hours stream, just free chat. Soon we'll do this and that. I mean, now that I'm back into the numbered live streams, 104 will definitely have Death with Dignity as well. Unless somebody can come up with a viable reason for me to stop reading Yudkowsky. Somebody was like, oh, he's a techno-fascist. And I said, why did you call him a techno-fascist? Well, that was like 3 or 4 days ago. No answer. So, we're going to keep reading that for now until I read something that I actually really strongly disagree with. But yeah, we're back into some numbered live streams. For a while, I was like, we did 100. I'm going to cap it off there. But we may not need to do that. So it is what it is. And this was what it was. Thank you all for showing up. Thanks as well to the YouTube commenters who will be commenting on this. Just thanks to everybody. All right. We'll see you in the next video.